Good day. My name is Brian Smith. I am a specialist assigned to the Newark CTPAT field office. Today's presentation is a continuation of the second one, which focused on the first part of MSC 4.2, which talked about network defense, patching, and security updates. This short presentation will focus on the third requirement, or the third must in 4.2, which requires partners to have policies and procedures to prevent attacks via social engineering. We touched on some of this in the second YouTube presentation. In that video, we covered a lot of material related to strengthening the network against attacks. But in this presentation, I want to focus on something that is very important: social engineering. I would ask that you keep a few things in the back of your minds as you watch this. You may want to ask yourself, how do we ensure we incorporate this material into our policies? And I say that because often I find that there is either no policy in place or the policy is weak and vague, especially when I visit foreign sites, but I do see some of that in the United States as well. Then I also want you to start thinking about how you will incorporate this material into an employee training program. Again, that is also something I find lacking. This is the criteria from section 4.2 we will be concentrating on in this presentation. Defending against social engineering attacks obviously starts with a plan and a policy to guide employees and administrators, but the number one consideration that must be made is training of the employees. Social engineering attacks typically target your employees, and the information they have can be used to deploy a very convincing phishing campaign later on down the road, or it can be used to get inside the company network. There are a number of additional resources available online, and as is the case with the other YouTube videos, there will be several relevant links to those sources beneath this video on the YouTube screen. So, what is social engineering? This is the definition that's provided by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or NIST. A general term for attackers trying to trick people into revealing sensitive information or performing certain actions, such as downloading and executing files that appear to be benign, but are actually malicious. Here are the definitions for phishing and vishing. Phishing typically is a term used to describe when a hacker attempts to gather information or entice you to click on something, enter data, usernames, passwords, etc., via an unsolicited email or one that is sent by a hacker. Vishing is when this is done via a phone call, and that happens more often than you think. It's actually kind of growing right now, and there's actually been some very prominent ones that were noted in the news media over the past summer in 2020. There is even a term when this is done via SMS or text messaging, and that term is smishing with an SM at the beginning. Social engineering. Based on my experience and validations and reading about hacking incidents, I think the main things you need to keep in mind are this: that almost every top 5 list of priorities with regards to cybersecurity has one thing: employee training at the number 1 spot. In-person training, which is provided on a regular basis. You do need to have solid social engineering policies for the IT department and for employees. This should be backed up by robust in-person training. Hundreds of millions of social media, hotel, banking, etc. accounts have been compromised over just the past 3 years. Now, apart from the obvious problems associated with this, how could all these hacks affect you and your company? Well, all that information that was stolen from all those attacks basically gets put up on the dark web and is basically sold to the highest bidder. When hackers buy this user account information, they then have valuable, credible information about your life, your business, your transactions. This then allows them to develop very credible looking phishing emails and spear phishing attacks on you and your company, etc. It gives them a ton of information to make very credible cold calls to your employees. So much so that to this day, they are still very successful at this. They get employees to change their passwords over the phone to passwords the hackers give them, or to give the hackers their login credentials. or provide the hackers more information for a variety of reasons. So the hacker may be calling just to get more information to maybe make more convincing phone calls later on down the road in order to get into your company. Very recently, as a matter of fact, several prominent social media accounts were compromised using this method. Hackers were able to dupe several of the social media outlets' employees to gain access to those social media accounts, and that was done over the phone, not via phishing emails. Employees need to be trained on what to look for when they get an unsolicited email or phone call or one that they find to be somewhat suspect. So the specialist will want to see that your company has incorporated language that addresses the threat associated with social engineering into an IT policy or an acceptable use policy, or AUP. The specialist during a validation will want to see that this has been incorporated into an employee training program. So companies should be able to monitor the training that was delivered to employees, along with the most recent training logs. Most malware today is now delivered via fileless email, meaning the malware is delivered in an email that does not contain an attached file. In the past, we were warned about opening email attachments that could have malicious code embedded in them. That still remains a threat, but today the far larger threat is from malware delivered via phishing links embedded in emails. The links can be disguised as legitimate websites or embedded within company logos that you would click on to get to that website represented by the logo. You want to teach your employees to treat any links in emails as suspicious, and then they should at least hover over the link carefully so as not to click on it. Just hover the mouse over the link and look at the pop-up box that shows the true link you will navigate to if you were to click on it. Again, if an email is trying to get you to go to a link, ask yourself, do I really need to click on that link? Or can I just search for the site in a search engine? Or perhaps if I know the website, just type it into the web bar, the web address bar in my web browser myself. Here in this example, I used a blank email to show you an example of how you verify the link. Just hover your mouse over the link and look very carefully to see if they match. Okay. But even if they match, that doesn't mean the link won't send you to a malicious site. But if they don't match, you can be pretty confident something is fishy. Is the sender's address, the email sender's address, exactly the same as another previous entrusted or verified email from the same source? Any photos, attachment, links should be treated as suspect. Tell employees to mouse over the links and photos and see if the web address that pops up in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, or maybe somewhere else on the screen, like in this example, it pops up right next to what I hover over, okay? To make sure it's legit and the same. Remember, many times when hackers send photos, they are hoping you click on them to make them bigger. What people don't realize is that the photo could be connected to a hyperlink and you're actually going to a web address that downloads malware to your computer. If you don't trust it, don't click. Don't reply to that email. Or give that person a call to verify that they sent it from a trusted phone number, using a trusted phone number. Okay, and that's if you have past interactions with them and can find a number that was previously verified and trusted. Instruct employees to carefully examine any links and email addresses. Email addresses can be spoofed. That means when you receive an email, the sender can create an email address that looks very similar to the legitimate one. Sometimes hackers include the legitimate domain name in the fake domain name. For instance, they will include the name of the company in the domain name, but surround it by another name, or add a number, or a fake department to make it look like it is coming from a specific department from within the legitimate company. And the email domain is basically what comes after the ampersand in an email address. So for Gmail, Gmail is the domain name. Okay, so johnsmith@gmail.com. Gmail.com would be the domain name. Phishing emails can be very convincing, especially in a spear phishing campaign, and that is when the hackers are targeting specific employees or maybe a specific department in a company. When hackers are spear phishing your employees, they may have a lot of background information to make it appear the email is being sent by someone that has a lot of inside knowledge about your company or the specific employee. That is because they probably do possess that information. Employees need to ask themselves, am I being asked to do something that is out of character for me, out of role for me, for my job, my duty, my responsibilities, or is it out of character for the sender or for the company the sender is purporting to represent? Is there a sense of expediency built into the email? Does the email try to put pressure on the employee to do something quickly? Or does the email try to use a form of manipulation in order to get the employee to send something or click on something? The email could appear to be from a higher level manager or an angry vendor, customer. And something else to be cognizant of are shortened or tiny URLs. URL is another name for a web address. You see these used a lot in social media and Twitter to save room, but you may also see them in emails. They have other purposes too, but they can disguise the true web address. And that's the main thing you need to worry about. When you shorten the web address or the URL, you cannot recognize where that's going to send it to. It's going to look completely different than the legitimate web address. So again, hover over the URL or don't click on it at all. And some emails can be constructed so that the entire page, the entire viewing area of the email is a hyperlink. They can create a blank screen or an overlay or a mask, if you will, that you can't see it, but you will see that your mouse will change as if there is a hyperlink there, that there's something there that you can click on. And I see this more and more all the time. Now, for our SunTrust example, this is an excellent example from an actual phishing incident. And this is a good example for a few reasons. The hackers are hoping to raise your anxiety level in an effort to get you to act quickly without taking the time to consider other options or potential dangers that lie beneath. First, the subject line in the email should raise anyone's concern. So they raised the anxiety level by saying the account was suspended, hoping to also make you ignore other parts of the email and get you to act faster. So starting at the top, the email address. Look closely at that. Look at the domain name, the part after the ampersand. It's missing the letter R in trust. Also, to me, the part before the domain or the ampersand is also suspect, as it has the word secure, which is preceded by a less than symbol. Now, they put the word secure in there, I think, to help kind of lend some credibility to the email, but that's not something I typically see in an email address. Okay. Now, working down, you can just totally ignore the brand logo, as that is the easiest part to copy and paste. Don't let the presence of branding or a company logo lend any level of credibility to the email. In some phishing emails, you may notice that logos are not quite as crisp, but that is not always the case anymore, because they are getting better at copying and pasting and generating the images into the fake emails by stealing information from legitimate emails and legitimate websites. Now to the body of the email. It has a link to visit suntrust.com. But the user in this example hovered over the link, and you'll see at the bottom I highlighted that area. And you can see it does not go to the correct site. That is a tiny URL, and it is not a match and should be treated as suspect. So what should the user do in this example? Well, they could just ignore the email, delete it, and if it was sent to their work email address, it should be reported to their IT department, as this may signal a start to a larger phishing campaign targeting employees of this company. I try to explain this to people all the time. Just because the link is typed out as a hyperlink, like in this example, does not mean it will go to that link. It does not mean you will go to that legitimate website. Likewise, just because a logo appears in an email does not mean you will go to the site depicted in the logo. For instance, just because I put the CTPAT logo in an email or in a document and connect a hyperlink does not mean that hyperlink will lead to the legitimate CTPAT website. And one other thing to consider, hackers routinely use something called website skimmers that basically skim all the parts of a legitimate trusted website. They can then create a fake version of that site that looks and behaves exactly like the real one. So for instance, they can create a fake page that looks like your banking site. When you click on the link, it takes you to a site that looks just like your normal banking site, and you enter your login credentials not knowing that you just gave the hackers that information. Hackers can then do this for other companies or for your company or for some of the websites that you visit routinely every day to do your work. Okay, so keep that in mind. That is why it is very important to either very closely inspect any web addresses sent to you or just navigate to the site by typing in the website address yourself or search for it. Google has algorithms that scan websites for known malicious codes. So you are pretty safe searching for websites via a search engine like that one if you don't know the address off the top of your head. Because again, you don't want to trust whatever is sent to you, especially if you suspect there's something wrong with the email address. Let's look at this example I made. Now, I know some of you will think this is kind of obvious, but I know for a fact, based on many, many discussions with people, that this is not as obvious as you may think to many out there in the trade community and on a personal level in the healthcare community. On the left, I typed the word Google into an email, okay, into my email. So then I right-clicked on that text and made it a hyperlink. And on the right, you can see what happens when I want to create the hyperlink. At the top of the box is the display name, which is Google, which displays in the email, which is what you see on the email. But at the bottom, the address I am directing you to is another completely different site, which in this case is the main CBP homepage. I can do this for images, logos, shapes, anything that I can basically put into an email. Because you can basically make anything you want in an email a hyperlink. It's not hard. That is why it's so important to either hover over the links or just go to the website directly using your web browser or searching for the site in Google or a search engine. And if you are ever asked in an email to visit a website that is very unfamiliar to you, do not copy and paste the link into your browser. That is also something that people have been doing and is bad practice. So, work with your IT folks and your counsel, your lawyers, to develop robust and comprehensive policies that specifically address social engineering. You will have to consult with local laws and regulations as they do vary widely from state to state and country to country. Obviously, CTPAT does not want you to create policy that is contrary to your local laws and regulations. Provide employees with clear and simple instructions on what they can post about the company and what, if any, proprietary information they can share via social media or online in discussion forums. Employees need to know they are part of the solution when it comes to cybersecurity. Many employees I talk to say, well, we have an IT department, so it's their job to look for this stuff. Or I've heard this from employees during validations. I have antivirus on my computer and that will protect me. They need to know that they must report any suspicious activity or if they think they may have clicked on something suspicious, a link or something like that. Now, pen testers, penetration testing, okay, pen testers. They are professional hackers that are hired by companies to hack into the company's network to look for weaknesses. And they often start by poring over social media accounts of your employees and even their companies' own social media accounts to look for any bits of information that will make their phishing attempts more believable. For instance, hackers may scour social media to look for photos taken from inside your company. They may see posters or announcements about an office party or some other internal meeting. There's something that's going on that only people inside the company should know about. They will then reference that event to make their email or phone call more believable to your employees. They will even talk about where office equipment is located or where the break room or something that happened, maybe a door broke or a light won't work or something like that. A light is off inside a building. It could be anything. Anything that can be referenced to help convince that employee that the caller or the sender of the email is even located inside the same facility. And again, we are only scratching the surface here in the interests of time. Again, below the video will be links, and some of them include real-world phishing examples. I think it would be beneficial to employees if some of these were included in cybersecurity training. Again, provide employees with clear instructions on how they must handle suspicious emails. What do they do with it? How do they report suspicious activity? If they think they clicked on something bad, they should know that the sooner they act and report it, the better. Sometimes, if caught early enough, the results from clicking on a malicious link can be mitigated before the hacker is able to look around and start moving laterally around the network, installing more malicious code and doing a lot of other things. Companies should look at the potential pitfalls associated with opening social media accounts and other accounts using company credentials or email addresses as their usernames, or registering with those accounts using company email addresses. Companies should begin to assess their exposure to risk, especially given the current pandemic and the possibility of long-term teleworking. As was discussed in a previous presentation, two-factor authentication, 2FA, and multi-factor authentication, MFA, should be implemented, which can go a long way at preventing or at least mitigating somewhat phishing attacks. Okay, and as I've said before, employees should be prohibited from accessing their personal web-based email on work machines and should be barred from sending personal emails to their work email accounts, and vice versa. This is a document released this year by the FBI. I will have a link to it as well beneath the video. I will make it a little bit bigger here. It warns about recent popular social media posts asking people to name their top 3 favorite foods, dog names, cars owned, etc., all kinds of things. All of these are answers to common password retrieval security questions. And this is an interesting read. This may seem like a bit of a leap, okay? I've had some people kind of, give me kind of a look like this couldn't really happen, but many people follow their banks, their other social media accounts, their streaming video accounts, and their employers on social media. So it isn't hard for hackers to connect the dots just by looking around what people post. They can kind of figure out what other sites they go to and belong to, okay? And then start looking for their email addresses on social media, which is also very easy to do. Or if they say, I work for ABC, company, and I know that ABC company, basically all their email addresses are constructed with first name, middle initial, and last name with periods in between at abccompany.com, I'm pretty confident I have the user's email address for work. So it's not a very big leap to use this information against employees. And just like we see a rise in crime and cargo thefts around holidays, phishing attacks typically get ramped up around natural disasters, epidemics, and other extreme news events. And don't think you are immune if you are experiencing a small dilemma in your small town or region. The hackers are constantly looking for victims. They know there are thousands of other hackers out there, all looking to feed upon the masses during the big events like coronavirus or the hurricanes that hit the Gulf every year. So they will drill down and look for regional events, also hoping that if you had some of this training, you may not think necessarily that a hacker would know about a flood in Mayberry, for instance, or a forest fire in Northern California, much of like what's going on right now as I'm doing this presentation. Don't forget, hackers are local. They aren't all located over in Kyrgyzstan. And if you heard me speak before, you know there are many motivations for hacking. Some are for financial gain, corporate espionage, and some do it just for fun. One of your suppliers, for instance, okay, so one of your suppliers may be developing a new innovative product in concert with your company, okay? There's a new product that you want to put out and it's kind of a secret. You don't want anybody to know about it yet. You're early on in development. And a competitor may see that your supplier experienced some sort of negative event, okay? It could be, like a fire, a flood, something to that effect that probably affected employees in the area around that company. And he will use that to their advantage to get inside and steal proprietary information about your product, your supply chain, etc. So they will craft emails with phishing links that basically say something to the effect that, we know you've been affected, click here for, assistance, or click here for updates, click here for news, or they may pose as the bank that most of the people belong to, like a local bank, and say, we are going to provide employees of your company with a special rate for or an interest-free loan or something to entice them to get them to click on it to get them through this disaster, for instance, or whatever it may be. Okay. Employees need to be able to basically hit the pause key and say, wait, I think this is suspicious. I want to verify the request with the person asking for a change or for information, or have something being done for them. Or if hitting the pause key is not practical, I want to bring in a manager at least to have a look at this. Or I want to look up the requester's phone number or email address in an internal directory instead of trusting what is being sent to me, because there's something about this email or this phone call that isn't kosher, doesn't sound good. Usually taking that step will cause the hacker to give up on that source and look elsewhere. But the employee needs to know that if they take that additional step, that they will not be disciplined for not acting immediately, because it's that immediate nature of the email that the hacker is counting on. And that is why everyone in an organization needs to be trained on this material. So that if the employee does get a request from a manager and says, I need to verify this isn't something we usually transact over the phone or via email, that the manager will understand and hopefully appreciate the caution shown by the employee. Because, again, oftentimes that is what the hacker is hoping to do. Act as someone in authority and get the employee to act quickly without thinking it over too clearly, and provide the information, make the change, etc., so as not to get in trouble for any delays. Employees should be told that IT will never call them and tell them to change their passwords, and then give them the passwords they need to use. Does that sound a little ridiculous? I know when I give this in some presentations, I get some smiles, and the reactions I get tell me that some people think that this never happens. I had 2 companies still doing that last year when I was doing validations, 2 large companies in Western Europe. In conclusion, in a validation, the specialists want to see there are policies in place to address the threat posed by social engineering, and that employees were properly trained on this subject and the associated policies. This should include phishing, vishing, and other topics we touched upon here. Effective cybersecurity training often includes real-world scenarios to drive the point home. Under this video in YouTube, there will be some links relevant to this presentation. I am very open to comments and suggestions on this presentation and future presentations. Thank you for your time.